And welcome. Hello again. I'm never quite sure exactly when I've gone live, so thank you for watching. I am just going to make some general small talk for a little while until I find who is actually there. If you are online, please shout out and say hi. I always love to be able to connect with people and know who I'm speaking to. So today I'm going to be just speaking briefly about how to write a meaningful media release. Let me talk a little bit about media releases and my experience with writing them. And this is something that I often feel like it's still a learning process for myself, even though I have written several. In my previous job, when I was a public servant working for the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade, we would regularly write media releases for things that were happening, not for us, but for our ministers. Now, we didn't have final say over how they would eventually be published. It was usually the ministers' offices who would tweak and who would do it. But we did get an idea of how you would basically structure them. So, and we would usually do things like give some potential language that the minister might use in making an announcement, some background for the project, contact details, and some other information. So I got very used to what a structure of what a media release might look like. Then I spent a year working for a lobby group, which I won't talk about which one for various reasons, but I was there on secondment and they issue a lot of media releases because their whole means for existence was really to advocate for their members. They were very politically active, and they wrote and they published a lot of media releases. Now, I never wrote any of those media releases, but I definitely read them, and I read what they'd written, and I understood why they were writing them and what their aims were in writing them. And similarly, there were a lot of other lobby groups who were working in that space, and I would regularly read their media releases too. And so I would get an idea of how that was coming through. Amongst other roles that I have at the moment, I am a member of the Zonta Club of Canberra Breakfast, which is a fabulous service organisation. Zonta International, there's a number of different clubs underneath Zonta International, but Zonta International, the peak organisation, was established 101 years ago to help empower women. It's a service club much like Rotary or Lions or others, but its main mission is to help empower women. So it's a very powerful and engaging and interesting organisation that does some amazing things. And in that organisation, I chair the Public Relations and the Communications Committee. Now, they have some amazing events, and the two key ones during the year are a pre-love fashion sale, which is about sustainable fashion, and they also do 16 days of global activism to end gender-based violence, which is a global initiative. And they have a particular Zonta Says No strategy. So in order to get publicity to both of those, as part of this committee, I draft media releases. Recently, as in over the last week, I've drafted a media release for them about the Snow Foundation, its generous grant of $6,000 to support an initiative for giving kitchen packs to domestic violence victims or survivors, as I like to term them. So this is women who have had to flee their home, often with children, been living in refuges for say 18 months, and now they've got public housing they're moving into and they don't have anything. So this provides them with details. And the media release that I drafted, that was then cleared by my committee and by the president of the club, was also then cleared by the Snow Foundation, and then we sent it out. And the result was fabulous. Within a very short time of it being sent out, we were invited to speak on ABC radio for Canberrans, 666 FM. So the next morning, we were contacted by a local TV station, and we've had the article in the Canberra Times, and I'm expecting potentially more media. So I guess my number one thing that I wanted to say is why write a media release? Like, why write one? And that's the key reason why you write a media release, is because you wanted your news to be picked up in the media. These days we're often so used to thinking of things as just social media, but traditional mainstream media is really important too. And if you want some news to be picked up by the media, that's what you do. So that is really important. And then the next thing I would say about how to write a media release, let's move on from the why to the how, is the firstly you need to have something newsworthy to write about. Now that might sound really obvious, but I often meet people who say, "Oh, I wrote a media release because I've got a new podcast, or I've got a new business, or I want to get better business, so I've written about my product and I've sent it out as a media release, and I haven't had any traction." Well, yes, I'm not surprised in a way, because you have to have something newsworthy. You have to have an angle, a hook, something that, someone who's, say, writing a newspaper is going to go, okay, that's going to sell copies. That's going to be something that people are going to want to read about. So that's something that's really going to help. So, for instance, when I launched my podcast, both of them, I have never written a media release. I have actually got media, but I've never written a media release. However, should I get to a really, really high download amount in a short space of time, should I win a podcasting award, should I, interview some absolutely crazily amazing guests that you couldn't, imagine that you would ever get on a podcast, and I managed to pull that off, then I'd write a media release. So then the media release would be, say if it was for the Canberra market, Canberra blogger wins international podcasting award. So that then would be the pitch. Does that make sense? So it's important to think about what your business is and what is happening there that is newsworthy. I've just started a new business. Who cares? I've just started a new restaurant. Well, once again, who cares? Unless you have an absolutely amazing angle to it, like multi-award winning Michelin head chef now starts a sustainable restaurant eating worms. It's a bit of an unusual business model. I don't know anyone pick it up, but something that really is going to keep people's imagination. So why we've had so much success with these Zonta media releases is because hello, Paul. You're pretty amazing too. This is Paul Boltwood from the Boltwood Report. Make sure to check out his Instagram feed from the Coromore Shire Council. He does amazing things. Yes, so make sure you have something that is really quite amazing to write your media release about, and think about your business and what is pretty awesome and amazing that is there. Not just your day-to-day thing. It needs to have a different angle. And why the Zonta media releases have been getting such traction is for a couple of reasons. And one is because it's community news and it's really important. And secondly, we had a particular angle of things that we wanted to have. And in the case of these particular media releases, the Snow Foundation is so well regarded in the Canberra region too, that having their name with that too, people really took notice. So it wasn't just, a group of middle-aged women are going to deliver some toasters to women who've come out of refuges. Like, that wouldn't be the angle. It's, the Snow Foundation, a reputable organisation, has given money to enable this reputable organisation to give support to domestic violence survivors. So it's a whole range of information there. So that is tip number one, is to choose a topic that is newsworthy. And if you don't have one yet, wait. And I should add too, before I move to the next point, that with some organisations, like I mentioned previously, lobby organisations, if you are a consultant and you're a lobbyist, you may issue a media release anyway because you want to show that you're being active. And in that case, whether or not it's picked up by the media, the fact you're a reputable organisation with a voice and you've put a statement out is itself important. And those statements need to go on your website somewhere where they can all be listed so that people can read and go, okay, XYZ lobby group has a view on government policies because of whatever, and you can see that list. So that's fairly important. For the majority of small business owners, though, you do need to wait until there's something that does fit that newsworthy category, and it could even be something like an event, like you have a new event on. And there's someone in my networking community who has a fabulous series of events. In fact, I'll tell you what they are. They're wine tasting on go boats, and this is through the Wanderlust series. And she wrote a media release, and she got some amazing media from that. So it really does pay to make sure you've got that newsworthy event and do it. Number 2, the title. Now, it's really tempting to have really catchy titles that are really cutesy-wootsy, but you really do have to have a descriptive title that says what the event is about. You don't want a title that's too long, because people, they will kind of lose interest by the time they get to the end. So it needs to be short and snappy, but it also needs to say what's happening. So, if the media decides to retitle it with something that's cute, that's their prerogative, but you just want to be clear that if that turns up in a subject line of an email, someone's going to know what it is. It's usually good to have your organisation's name in that, so it's really clear who that organisation is from. So in this case, like, my title read something like Snow Foundation grants Zonta Club X amount for project. So it's really clear just from that title, reputable organisation gives reputable organisation money for really good cause. So you can see already that that's got a title that if people are going to know that that's credible, it's reputable, they're going to be opening that email. And because that's another critical thing, is to understand how the media works and understand how journalists work. They are so busy, crazy busy. I know we're all crazy busy during this time, but so many jobs have been lost in media over recent years, and this has been exacerbated by COVID. And so many journalists don't have the time to do a lot of research, and they are also getting inundated with a lot of media releases. So you want to make their job as easy as possible. You want to make it easy for them to create really good content because you've given it to them, and that they don't really need to come back to you for anything, and that the next time you see it is in the media. If they want to do a feature story and talk to you further, that's great, but 9 times out of 10 they won't have that time. So you need to make it as easy and compelling for them as possible. And the best way you can do that, bringing to my next point, is to have a media release that is 1 page in length. Do not go longer than 1 page in length. They will not read more than 1 page in length. If they need more information, they will come back and ask you, and that's why you need to provide some decent contact information for that. So it needs to be short and it needs to be pithy. Don't put it in tiny small font to get more information in there. Keep it brief. Less is more. And number 4, write it in a style that is very similar to journalistic work, and that includes quotes of key people. So don't have Joe Blogs in your organisation saying, oh, this is really nice. You need the president of your organisation saying something important. And yes, verbal them. Don't wait for them to come back to you with what you think they're going to say. Give them an indication and clear it with them so that they know that this is what their quote is. So, you might have your president saying, I am really pleased and proud that my organisation that I founded when I was 14 years old is now giving $1 million to support babies affected by coronavirus. I mean, I don't know, I'm just making stuff up. But you want something that is really significant. So a quote, comma, said so-and-so and so, president of so-and-so and so, and then some more quotes throughout it. Because you want it to read as if a journalist has gone and interviewed that person. Now, the journalists, like I said, they're very busy. They're not going to have time to do that. But you want it to read like that. When you read the final copy, it's like, wow, yeah, this journalist has gone and spoken to this person, and this is what they've said. They must have had, a media briefing, or they must have done something. So you want to have those direct quotes in there. You want to have it from the most senior person in your organisation or someone really reputable, and it needs to be cleared by them. In the case of this Zonta one, I had quotes from both the president of the Zonta Club of Canberra Breakfast and the Snow Foundation, and it was cleared by both of them. So it had gone through, and the president had cleared it. She was very aware of what the quotes were that she was saying, and it also gone through the Snow Foundation, who were very clear about the quotes that they were saying, and they were aware that it was going to the media, and they were on the same page. So that's really important. Now, 5 is something that you might think is really obvious, but this doesn't always happen well, and that's to provide contact details. So you've written all this stuff about how fabulous you are, and at the end you should also explain a little bit about what your organisation and what your organisation does. In this case, for instance, I'd explain that Zonta is a service organisation that exists to empower women. But, it could be different depending on what you are. XYZ is a skincare company. The Joyful Frugalista seeks to empower women and men by helping them save money. For instance, the Joyful Business Club helps women in business to shine. Something like that. So at the bottom, and then contact details. For further information, contact. Name, title, email, mobile. Now, journalism media is a very fast-moving world. You might just have a window to get in on the evening news, or the newspapers that day, or the next day. They don't have time to try and chase you for a week. They will give up. So you need to have contact details there where they can contact you. And it might just be a case of contacting you to clarify a few details. So when I was speaking with the journalist Megan Doherty from the Canberra Times, who's a lovely, lovely lady, writes amazing things about the community in Canberra. She just had a few things she wanted to check. She wanted to check that the email that I'd given was valid. She wanted to check a few other details about, how long we've been doing this project and a few other things. So you need to be able to have those contact details, and you need to monitor those contact details too, which can be a problem, particularly if you're in a service club or if you're in an organisation where you get a lot of emails. You need someone monitoring them, and you need to be really proactive in following back. Don't just wait for a couple of hours. You need to jump when a journalist contacts you if you want your news to make it to the media. You've done all this work to write the media release, you then need to follow through. So if you're contacted, respond as soon as possible. Take that phone call, take the email, take the other things. This is really important. Just 1 minute. Yeah, sorry, hubby just needs to disappear because he's taken a phone call. Number 6 is to include photos. This is really important, particularly if you've got, say, an interest piece and you want some good exposure. Include photos. Now, some media, if they've got time and it's a feature article, they might send a professional photographer out to you to get some photos. But usually they won't. Usually they won't have time to do that. So you need to make their job as easy as possible by including photographs that are as professional as possible. So sometimes, they may not be, you might have taken them just with your own phone, and that's fine. And if that's all you have, that's fine. But if you have good quality professional photos, then send those good quality professional photos because they will make a difference. Earlier this year with the pre-loved fashion sale that the Zonta Club writes, we had some really, really good response from the media, and part of it was because we'd had someone, a photographer, volunteer to come and do professional style photo shoots with the Zonta ladies and a number of their friends. And so they'd all dressed up in these outfits, wearing these pre-loved clothes, looking like $1 million. And there was a lovely diversity of photos to show. So, a picture tells 1,000 words, right? Like, words are really important, but photos are pretty important too. Make sure when sending out the photos too, and actually I didn't do this last time, and it took a little bit of time to follow up on, talk about who is in those photos. If there are people, left to right, these are the people who are in the photos. And make sure the people who are in the photos are aware that you are using their photos for the media, because you don't want to have a fantastic media article only for someone to say, oh, I didn't authorize you to use the photo of me. I want you to take that down. I mean, it's pretty embarrassing for everyone. You don't want it to get to that stage. And when it's dealing with children, if they're not your own children, you need to be especially careful. As a general rule, on my blog, I never put photos of other people's children unless I am totally and utterly sure that their parents are okay with them doing that. I'm actually totally fine with my own children having their photos up there. My youngest in particular quite likes the limelight, so he's quite okay with that. But I always make sure that their school uniforms that identify where they go to school are not visible. And I always do that even with their express permission, so they're aware that that's what I'm doing. So photos are really important. And also include too the name of the photographer, especially say in the instance of the pre-love fashion sale, where it's someone who's a photographer who's donated their time to this cause because it's something they're passionate about. Now you want it to make that worth their while as a small business owner if they get the credibility that their photo's been in the papers and their name has been there, because that's something they can show. There's nothing worse as a photographer when you feel like you're the nameless person behind the lens and that your own creative input into that process hasn't been recognised. So where you know the name of the photographer, really do include that, because that is really important to do as well. Now 7, finally, sending it out. This actually is, I believe, the most important step, and this is actually the step that you, in an ideal world, you should be doing before you even write this media release, and that is because you should know who your media is. Now, not everyone works in this space like I do. I didn't realise quite how many media people I knew until I started to do a list for Zonta, and then I realised, oh yeah, I've been on 666 Radio FM. Oh yeah, I've got a friend who works in radio at 2CC. Oh yeah, I know Megan from the Canberra Times. I met her at a foodie event. She's lovely. She did a great article on me recently. Oh yeah, I know her Canberra really well. I know Amanda. We were both on a social media program together, 101 Local Humans, back in 2014. And Beatrice, her editor, we were both in the same writing program through ACT Writers Centre, and so on and so on. Yeah, so you can see I'm actually more connected to local media in particular than I realised I was. I didn't actually think I was until I went through this process. Now, I'm guessing most of you at home probably don't have those kind of contacts, but don't fear. There's 2 ways you can get around it. One is you can get another organisation who does have those contacts to send it out for you, and there are a number of organisations who do marketing who do have those sorts of contacts, and they do have that credibility. They can send it out for you. And secondly, you can cultivate those yourself. Now, this is not going up to some journalist you don't know and going, look at me, I'm fabulous, look at me, me. You know, it does take time, like with any relationship, to build that up, and to have that credibility too, that, you know, like when I come up with with media releases regarding Zonta, they know I'm credible. They know I'm actually doing it not to push my own barrow. It's because it's a charity that I'm really passionate about. It's a cause I'm really passionate about. And I think all of those things help. I'm not wasting their time giving them spammy information that isn't relevant to them. And I have a long-term relationship with them. But one thing you can do is just start by scanning, you know, what is the media in your organisation? What are your local papers? And it's not just the main ones, like in our case, the Canberra Times is the main one. It's also other things such as Canberra Weekly, City News. Just notice these. Okay, there's a thing called Canberra Weekly. There's a thing called City News. Other sort of publications, digital, like in our case we've got the Riot Act, which is regional. Just start noticing where you are reading and what your news, where you're getting it from. Most of those news organisations will have a specific email for sending media releases to. Ideally, you want to actually know the journalists themselves to bypass just putting it into their general slush fund with everyone else's. But you will know who they are, at least, and know that they've got a specific process. So start thinking through a list of those, and also start thinking through the list of the key ones you want to target for your particular brand, because it won't be the same for every brand. Like there might be specialist, or every brand or business, there might be specialist publications that are most suited to your particular business. So think about, you know, where your niche is. And you can also start to develop relationships with journalists through things such as Twitter. You can follow them on Twitter. You can interact with things that they have written on Twitter. Doing that in a natural and non-stalkish way. You don't want to freak them out too much. But, you know, just being aware of who is writing what and why. And that's really interesting too if there's a particular interest. Like going back to Zonta once again, when it comes to topics such as domestic violence, there are some journalists who don't want to touch that. They're just not interested at all. And there's some who are really deeply passionate about this topic. And so it's about finding those ones who are really willing to write about this and finding out why. And for instance, earlier this year, Zonta had some really good media, which didn't come through me. It wasn't anything that I'd written a media release on. It just happened, I think, through some members who'd been contacted. And there was a really good write-up by Michael Weaver from the Riot Act about the breast cushions that Zonta makes. So women, after they've had breast cancer, if they've had breasts removed, it's very hard when they sit in the car, particularly with the seatbelt going over. It's uncomfortable. So Zonta makes these breast cushions they can put under their arms, and they hand make them, and they put a lovely little note on them, and they deliver them with love through the hospitals. And I know at least one friend who has received these, and it's something that's very special to these women who have been undergoing this cancer treatment and are at a fairly low point of their life often. And so they did a really great story about this. And now I don't know why, but maybe it's something because they have a personal interest in cancer. They might have lost a relative or a spouse or a child to breast cancer, and it's a personal interest. So then next time there is something talking about issues such as breast cancer, that is a journalist who is really interested in that topic. So next time I've got something to write about this, I know that this is the person that I need to contact. So over time, you get this list. And if you're working in that space where you are going to do a lot of media, you will develop this over time. So, it starts, like I said, before you even write the media release, having those contacts. But don't panic if you don't have the contacts. Now, the other really important thing with that is when sending it out, don't just sort of do a bulk to all the contacts that you've ever thought about. I hope you would never do it as a CC so everyone sees each other's contacts, but even if you did have it, don't do it as a blind copy with a here is a media release blah. You wouldn't do that if you were applying for a job, so don't do it if you're sending out a media release. You will not get your results. Journalists are so busy. Sometimes some of them will get hundreds of media releases coming through their inboxes every day, and most of them are fairly crappy. They won't look at that. They probably won't even open it. The best tip I got, it was actually from Brie Element from C News. She's got some fabulously funny things on C News, by the way. That's the exclamation mark news. She's a self-identified, born-in Queanbeyan bogan, and she tells Canberra stories like they are. She's a mistress at storytelling. She's absolutely brilliant. She's also the former lifestyle editor from the Canberra Times, so she knows her stuff. And I went to hear her speak at a Wanderlust Live Your Best Life series, and she said, I won't open attachments from media releases. I get too many. You need to tell me in a few words, maximum 3 bullet points, I think her wording is, what the story is about. So that's what I do every time now. So I will send it out to each individual agency, and I will summarise in a few words why this story is so important. And I will tailor that message to each individual person. For instance, the pre-love fashion sale, going back to that. So that took place in March. I remember it was Friday the 13th. It was just before we went into lockdown for COVID. We were very lucky with the timing. When I sent out the media releases ahead of that event, I tailored it to each individual organisation. Now, when sending to Brie, for instance, because Brie is a plus-size lady who has proudly been on the cover of the Canberra Weekly in red and white polka dot bikinis, so she's very into body image, body confidence. So I sent her pictures that had plus-size women wearing clothes, and talked about how this is an inclusive event where every woman can walk out feeling amazing. So that was the message I gave to her. To other media, when we're talking to her Canberra, I know that the founder, Amanda Whitley, is one of the advocates for the Domestic Violence Crisis Service, and also her Canberra has quite a fashionista brand. So with her, I sent more photos of more younger women who were particularly stylish, and not just young Caucasian women. We had I think someone from South Asia who just really rocked it, looked fabulous. And the whole language too was around what an amazing fashion event this was. It's the best fashion event in Canberra for, women in Canberra in the know, and how money went to support domestic violence crisis service. So that was the kind of message for them. And then other people who I knew were particular advocates for domestic violence. We really talked about that. When pitching it to ABC, a particular journalist, Lish Fayer, is well-known environmentalist. She's got another website where she talks about how to save money through energy. She talks about being the queen of green. She loves a good clothes swap. So when I pitched that idea to her, I talked about the sustainability aspect of a secondhand event. So you can see then it's really helpful when you know what the interests of the particular journalists are, who they are, you've got a personal result with them, you attach a really well-written media release with some really good quality photos, and you also explain to them what is so significant and special about your event, linked in with what you know about their background. That sounds like quite a lot, doesn't it? Does anyone feel daunted about this? You don't need to, really. Actually, it's quite fun. And when you know what you're doing, it actually doesn't take a lot of time. But why you do it is it just is so impactful. If you think of how much money you would have to spend for an advertising campaign to get these sorts of results that you can get through a well-written media release, it's just gold. And for me personally, I mean, I do this out of love because I'm really proud to be a member of Zonta. But it's actually useful for me because it enables me to reconnect with people I know in journalism and media as well, and just sort of keep my credentials current, because next time I've got something for my own personal brand, be it the Joyful Frugalista or the Joyful Business Club, I've established that credibility and that confidence, and I know that the details are up to date. Thank you so much, everyone, for listening. Does anyone have any questions before I sign off? I've probably spoken way too much about writing, which is one of my personal topics. If you're interested, I'm half thinking of maybe putting together a course about how to write in business with impact, being a writer myself, and how to use your writing skills for maximum advantage. If that's something that's of interest, please shout out and say, yes, I would like to hear that, and that would be awesome. Thank you so very much. Bye.